Hello and welcome to Some of My Friends Read Comics. We've got Vance.
Mister, I've got one word in response to your demands. Nuts.
We got Chris.
Vince just stole my bitch.
Oh no!
I
don't even remember that line.
I knew you
have
were
no idea who
fascist
said
overlords, and this just confirms it.
So today we are reading some fascist overlord comics. These are from Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Although I think the official series was just Green Lantern, and they just put Green Arrow in there too.
Sort of looks it's you've seen the cover probably, but it's Green Lantern, Green Arrow, but in the circle it says also starring or co-starring. It seems like it's a last-minute decision to make Green Arrow part of this book.
Yeah.
And it's numbered like the Silver Age Green Lantern. So this was the 76th issue of the Green Lantern that started in the 60s or 50s, whenever that Hal Jordan gets a start.
I also love reading comics from this era that say all new, all now. And what year was this from, Kia?
Yeah, so this era is 1970, yeah. And these are by Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams. Denny O'Neil, who we just mentioned in the last episode, did pass away very, very recently. But, we've mentioned him before on the show. A couple episodes ago, we were just talking about Criminal Bad Weekend, a lot about the insides of the comic book industry. Yeah, their guts and all that. And Denny O'Neil was one of those guts for sure.
And we also did Ra's al Ghul's Birth of the Demon stuff, which is Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams.
Yes, exactly. Very, very. We're getting right back to it. Yeah, right back to Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams here. What else should we say about Denny O'Neil? Vince, I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about him. I don't know much.
Unfortunately, he's always merged in my head with Neal Adams because he frequently collaborated with him, and they have Neil both in their names. So sometimes I forget who did what. Neil is obviously the artist, but Denny O'Neil, obviously he created Ra's al Ghul, which is Ra's al Ghul is his biggest legacy. But he was also an editor and did a lot of frequent hires for both Marvel and for DC. So he actually hired Frank Miller for Daredevil. So without Denny O'Neil, who knows where Frank Miller is? Probably good in the long run, but not for comics necessarily.
He's done more. I think he's done more good. Come on.
Yeah. He also gave Mike Mignola his first regular inking gig, so he's very influential in terms of hiring process of major people, giving them their first start in the industry. But also he created one of my favorite characters, Matches Malone, who we talked a lot about. And I couldn't confirm this, but it looks like in all the obits he may have named Crime Alley, the area where the Waynes got killed. Real creative naming of Crime Alley.
Crime Alley.
But
don't go hang out there. You're gonna get murdered. Your kid's gonna become a superhero.
But Denny O'Neil, he was involved with the editing of A Death in the Family, where Jason Todd got killed. He's got his fingers all over Batman. He created Azrael, the replacement Batman in the '90s with Joe Quesada. He's all over Batman. He's all over Marvel Comics. He's all over hiring. He was quite the figure in comics.
And he's one of the rare figures that worked as an editor and that worked for both companies that almost nobody has anything bad to say about him personally. A lot of editors like Jim Shooter and Marv Wolfman and different people that have had to work as editors, people really hated them because it's a job where you're somebody's boss. But Denny O'Neil, I've only read good things about him. And like you mentioned, he gave a lot of people their start. I think he might have gotten Christopher Priest his start as well. I don't remember that, but he's kind of like Mark Grunwald for Marvel. He was one of the primary architects for a long time for DC, and he also did some writing work for Marvel.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
And this important fellow. And the thing we're covering now is probably one of his biggest comics, and I'm surprised it took us this long to get to Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Green Lantern and Green Arrow, Green Lantern, whatever.
We haven't talked about either of them very much, to be honest. Have we ever talked about much Green Lantern other than
no, because I don't
stuff he appears in? Yeah, I don't.
I mean, he appeared in Justice League stuff. Obviously, there's been a lot of different Green Lanterns. I don't know how much Hal Jordan we really went into, and none of us are really big Jeff Johns fans. Who revived Hal Jordan. So anything past 2004 regarding Green Lantern, we've just kind of ignored. And I do know that this particular book, this was always called like the social justice book, and this was going to be like the political book. But, when you hear like a book that was political for comic books in the 70s, you think, oh, this is going to be like super heavy-handed or like hilarious or like ironically like trying its best, but come on, like this is not going to be very nuanced. And so I just never wanted to read it. Like, quite honestly, I thought it was going to be pretty heavy-handed, and so I didn't really want to read it.
Yeah, and I have read, it's been like a year and a half ago now, but I read a bunch of like Justice League stuff from around this time, and it is very heavy-handed. Like, it's all like they save an alien planet from pollution, and then there's a big moral, and Green Arrow won't shut up. He's so sanctimonious, and he also is constantly sexually harassing his coworker Black Canary. But then they date later, so it's fine.
Is him calling her Bird Lady like a joke for them? Like, it's very weird. He's like, "Hey, Bird Lady, what's up?" All through this comic, it's very weird for me.
I guess that's just what he calls her. He's the Hawkeye of the group. He can't call people by their names.
But like Green Arrow can become like very quickly like what people hate about liberals. I mean, on top of other things that people hate about liberals, but like the very like, what am I trying to even say? The words, basically like the faux wokeness or being more concerned with sounding woke than actually being woke. Performative wokeness, that's the word I was looking for.
Right. I said sanctimonious. That's the same.
Yeah. Arrow can very easily go towards that if not handled with a deft hand.
And he's definitely, I mean, his real life identity, he's not as rich as Oliver Queen, is not as rich as Bruce Wayne, but he is a millionaire. Yeah. So he would definitely be like living in Brooklyn in a loft apartment today. He would have, he would tweet something stupid and get 50,000 likes about how, capitalism is bad, while renting, his warehouse loft to people.
Yeah, I just remembered as well, I do have to mention, after Green Lantern and Green Arrow, we're going to jump into JLA and Avengers. We were reading all the DC versus Marvel stuff last time, and we're going to start with issue 1 of JLA and Avengers here. Did we say which issues we're actually reading of this Green Lantern and Green Arrow? It's the Hard Travelin Heroes era, which there's like a big trade that goes from 76 to like the late 80s. We're just going...
issues, yeah.
The issues, thank you. Issue 76 to issue 87, something like that.
Yeah, I think
we're reading issue.
Yeah, but it skips 88 for some reason.
I don't know.
It's probably a fill-in.
Yeah.
It probably had nothing to do with I don't know.
Hard Travelin' or Heroes.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of these books didn't have much to do with Hard Travelin'. We'll see. But we're just going to read 76 through 81. But let's jump into it here, because I think this first issue has a lot to talk about within it. It's definitely the more loaded of the issues, I think, as far as what we get to. But we kind of hit the ground running with it. There's this old man who's being attacked by, some kids who are like, "Hey, we don't like your kind around here, old man," and start shoving him around. And Green Lantern's like, "Whoa, this is not good," and is stopping this kid. And then people start throwing cans at him. And he's like, "What the hell? I'm just trying to prevent crime." Green Arrow's there, who is instantly like, "You don't know anything." And he's like, "I'm just doing my job." I've heard that at the Nazi war trials before. And
he immediately goes to Godwin's Law. And I understand that we're in the 70s, and so Nazi Germany is only 30 years away at that time. But he immediately leaps to calling him a fascist Nazi person, which, to be fair, feels very similar to today. And this guy was a corporate fat cat that they were beating up because he was a slumlord trying to basically exploit all of his tenants to basically get them to leave so then he could sell the property for more money. So he is a corporate fat cat. He is an asshole. And
he's terrible, but what's funny is that he's showing up in person to do this. And everybody knows he's like to boo him on site. Like, everybody's anger is completely directed at the right person, and he is a bad guy, and he still just shows up. Like, why don't people just move somewhere else? It's not my problem.
Doesn't he later be like, "Hey, why'd you show up here? Why don't you call me on the phone like we usually do our illegal business?" I don't know.
Yeah, was that him? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense that this fat cat is just showing up in this slum, in what's supposed to be, the equivalent of Harlem.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that kind of don't make any sense as far as the storytelling of a lot of the stuff goes, but it's convenient and it works. But we've got this other guy shows up. He's a member of the community, and he's like, "Hey, Green Lantern, I've been reading all about how you're helping out the blue skins and the orange skins and the purple skins. But how about us black skins, huh?" And instantly, wow, things change for Green Lantern. He's like, "Whoa." And so he goes
and that's been that's the thing that I've seen that particular page and that particular panel like a ton, and specifically describing this comic and like out of context and even kind of in context, it is really heavy-handed, but at the same time, like I think like given where we are as a nation and given where we are in terms of Black Lives Matter and police brutality, I think it's a very interesting story for us to be reading right now, and I don't know if it's as it's heavy-handed, but it's also written for 8-year-olds. So,
yeah.
So I think it's necessary in certain cases.
Yeah.
And
it also helps that like Neal Adams is able to draw this 75-year-old black guy without it being like a caricature or a cartoon. That he's realistically drawing what this guy would actually look like. Which he's like missing teeth and he's like. He's got some kind of back issues, obviously. But again, he's like, you can tell from looking at this guy, it's like, oh, this guy's had a life.
Yeah. I feel like Adams used a lot of photo reference, didn't he, at that time? Just the way his poses are, it looks like he's definitely taken photographs more so than any other artist of that era.
He definitely is influenced by photos.
Yeah, and then, but yeah, and I think it's interesting, again, given Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter particularly, it's interesting how much that this is posed against the Owens, the Guardians of Green Lanterns, like alien people that give the Green Lantern powers, they're all blue, and the idea of like paying attention to blue lives, I think that's a really interesting, insinuation in this book. I also think it's really interesting for as famous of a page this is. It seems like it's cut off, at least in the digital version, that like there was probably an ad on the bottom half of this page.
That seems to happen a few times through this first issue. I think was this first issue a double-sized one because
it's 24 pages, 25 pages.
Yeah. Why did it feel like a double-sided?
A lot happens.
A lot does happen.
If this book had been published in 2005, this would be like a 5-part storyline where like end of part 1 would be this moment.
Well, so after this, Green Lantern goes and he confronts this fat cat, and he's like, "Hey, I heard that you suck." And I don't know, not much of anything comes of it. He goes like, "Get out of my sight." And his goons carry him away because, I don't know.
Green Lantern starts roughing up the goons, and then the blue aliens, like the Green Lantern, brain trust, is like, "Hey, you're a space cop. That guy's not committing a crime. You're out of line for doing this."
What are you doing? Which I question that, like, what crime and laws are the Owens ascribing to? Are they
right? Like this is when everything just
Earth
fell
and specifically
apart
New York law.
I guess it's like Prime Directive, whereas like you have to follow the laws of wherever you are.
Okay, well then that makes sense. Okay, that makes more sense because like he didn't commit any crime. I'm like, y'all should have some type of like moral law that doesn't ascribe to Earth law necessarily, because clearly the slumlord's a shithead, and he's a wrong person, but he's legally within his means to do this shit.
Considering later how upset they get about pollution, like they should be like, "Oh, you Captain traded for this pollution, so that's fine." They clearly don't like that, but here they're like, "You didn't catch this guy committing a crime, so you're out of order, Hal Jordan."
I do,
and he.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was about to change the subject. Go ahead.
Well, I just coughed, so I lost whatever I was about to say.
All right. I do like how interesting it is, though, that at this point, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to solve the problem. Because the book has established that Green Lantern and Green Arrow's problem is not one of crime. He's not really a guy that you can just beat up to solve this problem. And this is a real person. And this is throughout the whole book, is they're dealing more with like real people than supervillains. So I don't know how,
what?
It gets a little later.
Which is funny too, because it's such a Marvel thing to do.
There were very few real people throughout this book. That guy at the beginning, And that's it. That's the only real person.
I think the second arc also has the second issue has a real person bad guy. But either way, it's not the Mandarin. We're not fighting, Sinestro.
Sure.
We're
not. Like it definitely, it's funny because like Spider-Man did that, a few years earlier of like introducing characters like Green Goblin or the Kingpin, and then like at the end of their story, they don't go to jail. They're just, they're done with them for now, but they'll be back because they haven't actually committed a crime that Spider-Man can arrest them for. Like, it's interesting that like to me, it's a very normal Marvel thing, but for DC, you're like, oh, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't just punch this guy.
This is a weird DC book when in that context, yeah.
So while Green Lantern is doing some busy work out in space for the Owens, because they're like, we're mad at you. You go clean up some rocks.
You got assigned traffic duty, desk duty.
Yeah, pretty much. Green Arrow says, all right, I'm going to go record this guy, this fat cat. And, some fighting breaks out, and the tape recorder accidentally gets shot, and he goes, well, nuts, there's my evidence. And then eventually Green Lantern and Green Arrow team up. Green Lantern pretends to be some other guy with his ring, and convinces.
Green Arrow tries to blackmail the guy, and then the guy shows mob goons, including again like Italian people that Neal Adams must have just like traced, because the guy's like so aggressively Italian looking. Yeah. But then they catch him, and they're like, oh, but he doesn't know that we've caught these killers, so we'll just show up as the killer, and he'll confess.
Mm-hmm. So they can bet, but also they just brought an attorney with them, a city attorney or something.
They just bring the DA, to hear the confession.
Yeah, clearly I can't get get an audio recording of this because it'll get broken. So I'll just bring an attorney. That'll work.
Which is the DA gonna testify in this case? How is that going to work?
I don't know. He arrests the guy. Is that allowed? Can district attorney do that? Put someone under arrest? I don't know.
I guess he can. I don't know.
So. That's what happens. And then, they basically are like, well, this fat cat's done. Let's go on a trip to see the rest of America and how everybody lives and all that kind of stuff. And we're not going to use our powers, and we're going to be human. And also this Owen guy is going to come with us because he's like, are they under arrest? Are they in trouble? Are they under
I don't know. I don't remember.
Green Lantern's basically on probation, and they're like, we're going to assign this guy to watch you because you're out of line. You're not.
You're a loose cannon. Orders. You're a loose cannon. You're trying to you've got your own agenda, and we can't have that. And so, at this point, I'm very excited for the future issues. I'm promised a road trip across America, seeing lots of small town stuff, just kind of different corners of the DC universe. And so, they got an interesting cast of characters. We're promised a lot of social equality, black justice, all that kind of stuff. Well, let's go. Let's keep going.
That's where I'm at. I think the promise of this first issue, I think this is a pretty good stake in the ground first issue.
So it's great.
To let you know where it's going, it doesn't go there, but
not at all. I kind of
loses the plot pretty quickly.
I honestly kind of want to stop the episode here because that's all we get that's interesting to me. I won't.
I think it's interesting, the idea that Green Lantern is having this crisis of conscience where he's working for the cops, but now realizing maybe the cops are bad, and maybe my deference to authority is not always right and morally just, that I always defer to whoever's in authority because they must be right. I think that's a very interesting crisis of conscience for Green Lantern.
I think there's better ways to tell that than having an evil space judge chase him on his chair and be like,
oh yeah.
Well, we'll get there.
No, I disagree. That is the best way.
That is the best way. But that is interesting. While splitting them up, I think is interesting that this issue does the same way. Is that Lantern's having his own issues, but then Arrow is just going off on his kind of wet work way to solve the problem, his own dirty less than glamorous superhero way. I think that it splits them up very well in this arc, and then it's all done in 25 pages. And Kia, you said there's a shit ton of stuff going on in this story, in this issue, and there is, and I think it handles it well enough. But of course, you guys are scratching the surface and that doesn't make any sense. And I go, I guess it doesn't, but I enjoyed it.
Well, yes. Okay, so I feel in the next issues, okay, let's just keep going here. issue 77. It's about like they run into some small town that has a mine. I guess like people don't really see superheroes very often down here. I don't know. There's too many of them superheroes in the big cities. We can't pay attention to all of them.
But they're not paying attention to the bullshit out in the real world with them, you know, liberal fat cats, you know, not fat cats, but, you know, those liberals living in their own world where they can talk about this shit. We're minors and we just got to, like, survive and, like, we can't deal with all this. I get it, you know, like, the rest of the world's going on, but we're trying to survive down here. I get it.
Yeah, and like the mine owner is evil, and I guess the story at the end is just that like Green Lantern and Green Arrow try to stop the mine owner, but all the employees help him, and they're like, "Yeah, but he's our boss. We work for him, and like he keeps us going." And
what? That's not what happens.
Is that not what happens? I got like really, I could not bring myself to like pay attention throughout these.
There's a lot of characters in these things, and then there's some double crossing on top of that.
Yeah, so what happens is they get attacked by the townspeople who think that they're working for the boss. And they're like, no, we don't work for the boss. Like, we're just, you know, passing through.
And they think they're
and they explain the situation, which is that, that there's a folk singer that has been arrested and sentenced to death for really no reason. And that they're going to try to bust him out. And they're like, okay, I guess we're going to help you do that. So, and then literally the bad guy, the mine boss, he has hired Nazis or ex-Nazis to work for him. So they have landmines like guarding his compound. So it turns into just a clusterfuck. And then they like finally get to the guy, and then the person, like the apparent leader of these, you know, the people who are fighting them, turns on them, and they're like, yeah, I set this guy up to break their spirit. He's basically my inside man.
Yeah, he wanted them to rise up at a point where they weren't like didn't have their shit fully together. So then like they would lose to the boss, and then be like, we can't ever rise up again because the last time we did it, we were fucked. Which is shit that happens and really interesting to see in a comic book, like the union busting tactics of exploitive bosses. I thought it was really interesting to be in a comic like this. It's a little clumsy, but I also think like, whoa, what the fuck, we're doing this here? Okay.
I thought it was very interesting because I did see it as kind of like a union analogy, and that he's like, you know, ratting them out, and then of course he can't go through with it because the boss is like, all right, you know, prove that you're loyal to me by murdering, you know, Green Arrow. And he can't do it in time.
But Arrow is there. He's tied up, and Arrow's like, fucking do it. You're a coward. I bet you won't do it. Like, Arrow is, like, ready. Like, Arrow is, like, taunting the double-crosser who eventually doesn't double-cross them, I guess. But, yeah, I love it.
Yep.
Arrow's an asshole.
We find out in the next issue, that's his go-to move, is to just be like, go ahead and kill me. See if you can.
I kept on waiting for the black people to show up because I thought this was going to be like the whole theme of this run, and there weren't any black people in this issue, so I think that's why I was like, where are the characters? When does the story start?
It immediately went from being like social justice in, you know, like urban areas to like, oh, what about social justice in rural, you know, mining towns?
Yeah. Also, I don't think there was a single other black person in the rest of the issues that we read, so that was also a thing.
That might track.
I mean, there was other minorities in the issues coming up.
There were. That's another topic.
Which, I mean, yeah, because is it the next issue the one where they actually go to like a reservation?
Well, yeah, they start you, and then the Manson family shows up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, this is, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, this is the issue sometimes with white liberals, is that they are very progressive and they have very progressive ideas around like corporatism and work, you know, workers' rights, but then there's a huge blind spot when it comes to people of color. And
yeah, pretty much like you were saying, like performative social justice. That's pretty much at this point what I think the first issue was, and it's like, okay, now we're doing some other stuff.
They, white liberals, myself included, get very derailed by, like, you know, like as we've talked about, like, or not, we haven't specifically talked about, but like Black Lives Matter quickly turned into police brutality, which is very much a facet of Black people's experience. And towards racial equity, but it's not the only experience. And there's a lot of other things that are involved without just police brutality, but somehow white people like to make that about just police brutality, which it is a big facet, but not all of it, because we lose the plot sometimes.
Yeah.
I wish we had the letters pages though from these books because I bet it would have been interesting.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
keep politics out of your comics, like the good old days.
I don't think they would have printed those.
They would always have like a contrarian person who's like, this book is reached a new low. Green Arrow, so annoying. Get him out of here.
I would love it. I would love it if they had like specifically like combative towards their letters, like, how dare you show about these things? Keep politics out of my comics, and you're wrong anyways. Green Lantern's the worst, and then bad words in there, and they're like, just cancel your subscription. That's all I would write as the editor, and just put that in my letters. Like, we don't want your cock here.
Yeah, I will say, and I know we haven't introduced. She's showing up in the next issue. I read the Black Canary series from the early '90s. She had, I think, like 15 issues or something like that. And I remember I read in the letters page, and I literally couldn't believe it. So, this was comics in the '90s. But somebody was like, why is Black Canary using martial arts and fighting crime in high heels? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And their response was basically, because their bigger point was about how unrealistic and how cheesecakey parts of, Black Canary was. And their response was like, we exaggerate the physiques of all our characters, so it's not a sexist thing. And also asking why doesn't Batman wear high heels doesn't make sense because men don't wear high heels. And it's just like, I don't think you understand what the issue is.
What?
Yeah.
This was published by an editor in response to a letters page. It's like, this is pretty sexist. And they're like, no, you don't understand. It's the same. We're objectifying everyone.
Yep.
That sounds like a comic book.
Yeah. So all right. So at this point, after this mining issue, I'm still on board with the general premise. I'm like, okay, we're gonna go to some other small town next. We're gonna, get some other facet of real life there. And where do they go? They're on like a Native American reservation.
This is all checking out. This is all making sense to me. I'm like, okay, cool. We're still on the plot.
Yeah. But meanwhile, like we do get a quick little scene of Black Canary. First time we've seen her, Dina Drake Lance, who's fighting this biker gang, and eventually there's just like too many of them, and one of them just runs her over with a motorcycle, and they take her motorcycle and they bounce. Not a good start for Black Canary. Sorry, Black Canary. But I'm like, okay, we're gonna get some women's equality issues. That sounds good. We don't, but that's what I'm thinking here at this point. We then the biker gang goes into this bar where they're all hanging out. I don't know. I'm instantly turned off by this issue. Do Native Americans refer to themselves as Redskins? I don't think they do, but somebody here does. And they get attacked by this gang. It all just feels very I don't know.
These two particular issues lost me instantly. I read them a few times because I could not follow. I could not keep track of what was going on.
Yeah, so they go back to I don't know. They deal with the biker gang. I don't know why the biker gang mattered because they're not the bad guys. It's the Native Americans. There's one in particular named Joshua. There's a big panel. This is my panel of the week.
Well, he's not a Native American. He's a hippie.
Oh, he is?
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's very clearly coded to be a Manson hippie.
Okay, yeah. All right.
That's where I I'm trying to feel out where O'Neill's politics are here, but I'm like, are we on the side of the Native Americans? Or are we side on the hippies? Because they in terms of progressive politics, it's and he seems to hate hippies, but he's not too. I couldn't figure out where his politics were, but then it just turns out to be a Manson person. So.
Yeah,
but he's also
he's on the side of the Native Americans though. It's just this is a bad hippie.
Yeah, he's got hypnotizing powers, and he's got Black Canary hypnotized to not like Green Arrow?
Yeah, I don't know. When he sexually harasses her, she's not like, oh, good. She's like, please leave. And he's like, this isn't normal. Normally, she appreciates my unwanted advances on her because he just kisses her to try to snap her out of it.
It doesn't work. Eventually they get out of there, and they're just like, I guess we can't do anything. Too bad. There's a nice little panel of Black Canary. They're like, hey, you have to shoot Green Arrow in the face here. And she's just like, I can't do it. I know there's there's like something about this person that's good. And so Green Arrow just leaves. Green Arrow and Green Lantern say, like, I guess at some point we'll have to go back and take care of all that bigotry. I'm like, bigotry? Was that the story here? Who was a bigot?
I guess Joshua was, because he wanted to kill all the Native Americans for no reason to start a race war.
Oh, he did? Okay, I missed all that.
So that's, again, like, that's the Manson-y stuff, is, like, for no real reason, he wants to, like, start this, conflict between the Native Americans and the white people in the town. So, yeah, it didn't really come through. There's also a somewhat clumsy, like, explanation that, like, Black Canary is from Earth 2, blah, blah, blah. Here's her whole story in, like, 1.5 pages. And you're like, what did that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I don't know. So we don't get much of a resolution here. The next issue has a terrible cover. We're not going to talk about it. Let's skip over it.
Is that the one with him on the totem pole?
Yeah, and Green Arrow is dressed like a Native American, talking about his red-skinned brothers. Great.
Hopefully he doesn't dress like a Native American in this book. I hope not.
I mean, what does he dress as? I didn't even realize that was him until, like, they get him hypnotized and he's wearing, like, a bright yellow outfit.
Because hypnotized, kid. This is guys.
What? Then why is he fighting Green Lantern?
He is a Scooby-Doo villain who shows up as a ghost to scare the white people and then to inspire the Native American people into believing in themselves again because they're so broken by the system. So
White savior.
He dresses as a yellow ghost.
White people
I hated this.
White people don't do this.
I hated this. I hated this so much.
He knew the Green Lantern would get suspicious, so he, like, makes his ghost costume all yellow. It's very stupid.
It's not the worst comic we've ever read because we already, we did that pretty recently. But it's still like I'm not enjoying any of this.
Right. This is one of those. This is, quite frankly, like I was really excited by the first issue of this. I like the second issue of this, and then I like where this is going. I'm interested to see like what 70s politics are of like a fairly woke writer of the 70s, like actually putting it into his content in a comic ostensibly for children or early teens. I'm interested to see all that, and then it's just like lost the plot for the next 2 issues. Not what I wanted to see, and we talked about this with other books, but like the promise of what I was expecting in the social justice book has kind of gotten lost. I was excited to see Native Americans in a mainstream superhero comic. I thought that was interesting. But having him dress up like a Native American as a Scooby-Doo villain to inspire them as a white savior, like that is all like, no, thank you. And then they just go to sci-fi books for the next 2 issues.
We're not even in America at all. Damn it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because like this, along with like Jack Kirby leaving Marvel and a couple of other things, are like this. Like we're in the Bronze Age now. It's 1970. Like comics are a little bit more mature. There's the Spider-Man issue where Harry Osborn reveals that he's basically taking speed. That it's like the comics aren't just for kids anymore. We're in the Bronze Age now, but like this is very helpful to be like, no, there's still Silver Age stuff all the time. Whereas like this is aggressively Silver Age. Like this is Batman dressing up like the mark that the Penguin is trying to catch, so that he's like, oh, see, I've caught this guy, and then it turns out to be Batman, and you're like, well, what were the odds of that happening? Where it's just like a huge coincidence, doesn't make any sense, very silly.
Yep. So what's going on in the next couple issues here? We got
I love this cover.
The cover is great.
The cover is
it's
hilarious.
Like a news story. Yeah.
So
guilty, conspiracy trio sentenced to death. And the little line underneath, judge says trial was fair and impartial. That's my favorite bit. If you got to point that out in your news article, there's something wrong
and
here.
Specifically like your photo caption or your subheadline, yes, of course, I love it. There's a great Twitter account I follow called Movie Heads, which just takes like screen caps of headlines of movies, like of newspapers and stuff, and then criticizes them from like a copy editor's perspective of like, is this a good headline? Is this a good like subheadline?
Oh, yeah.
Are they using the space properly to like convey their story? Like the fact that like the front page never says Green Lantern or Green Arrow in terms of this conspiracy trio is a problem that they would say as a copy editor. Like it's not a great newspaper cover. But and the judge says trial was fair and impartial fucking got me. Like that shit is hilarious.
That is hilarious.
So what happens? How do they get sentenced to prison? A truck runs into them, and they go flying over the bridge. And the Owen guy from the blue skin who's there with them to help them, he has some powers, and so he saves Green Lantern and Green Arrow instead of letting them die.
Yeah, he just saves Green Lantern, and then Green Arrow is able to save everyone else. But in the process, a bunch of pollution gets dumped into the harbor.
But I love it though, because they're like, we weren't going to put any costumes on here, but Lantern's like saving everybody with his power ring. He's like, well, now that we're saving everybody, I guess I'll just put everybody in costume. That seems fair, right?
Yeah.
This checks out.
And they end up on some boat, and then the boat explodes. That's where
the boat's going to explode unless they dump a bunch of toxic chemicals into the water. And I go, that's interesting. And I also like that Arrow is like, I'm not mad at these people for dumping shit into the ocean, which is an interesting like nuance to it. It's like, yeah, this sucks, but they were put into this position by their evil corporate masters. They're the real enemy, right, America? And I do kind of like that. I like that. Yeah. I like that little touch.
I guess that's an interesting premise. It doesn't seem this comic doesn't seem to be about that.
It doesn't follow up on it. But I also I like the idea that this book doesn't just go to the base level surface of like these people were caught in like a trolley dilemma where they had to either, and I guess there's another trolley problem later in this thing. But do we put these chemicals into the ocean or river or wherever, or do we save the lives of these people? And they're put in like an unwinnable situation. And the idea that like we're not judging these people for it, we're judging the people who forced them to have to make this decision, I think is a much more interesting nuance to just a simple like black and white question. It doesn't follow up on it, but I think that the fact that it at least raises that question is an interesting idea.
I think the nuance all comes from you thinking about it, though, Vince. I don't think there's a lot of nuance in here. Yeah. Like, they just brings up, like, okay, different, like, things happen, sure.
Yeah, and but I mean, it's text in the book that Green Arrow's like, look, I'm not mad at these people for polluting because they had to, but it's because, they're in this, no-win situation. So I agree with Vince it's the text.
But it doesn't follow up on it. And the fact that I latched
onto it. They're whisked away to space before they can do anything.
Yeah, the fact that I'm latched onto it and like imagine all the stories and like possibilities of that is like on me. I'll get that. I'll own it.
No, that's how I felt after the first 2 issues. Like there was a lot of stuff I was imagining, and it's just like, oh, we're just going to mention other things we could tell stories about and then not tell stories about them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hashtag my problems with Star Wars. But that's okay.
So they get the Owens send them back to space and say, hey, you guys are in trouble, because they care about random things sometimes.
Well, and I think they had the option of like a lot of people dying, or they called it the annihilation of the Earth or some bullshit like that. And I'm like,
I don't know.
And this is where I'm like, calm down, guys. It was just one ocean that was polluted, but whatever.
It's like we got a trash island out there in the Pacific, buddy.
Which is still like horrible, and I shouldn't be saying like it's not really that, guys. Calm yourself.
But like also, big enough for an outer space group of cops to say, "Hey, Earth, clean up that ocean."
Yeah,
I don't know.
But
they could easily do. By the way, they're so judgy about this. But like, why don't you just come fix it, guys?
Yeah, it's easy to clean it up. Like we were just trying not to die so that we could clean it up. But you whisked us away to space before we could do anything. Like you didn't even give us a chance to see if we could do anything about it. Come on now.
It is funny because this is like a much weaker Green Lantern than I'm used to. He's constantly like, it's like charging his phone, or it's like once an issue, he's got to like hold his ring up to his lantern.
Mm-hmm. And say his speech.
Yeah, and give his little speech. It's just kind of funny because it's just like I think of Green Lantern as being like Superman level powerful, but like he has this, limit where he's like, oh, it's been like 12 hours. I got to charge up again.
Yeah. Well, also the Owens are like pissed off at him. So they're just like limiting his power to begin with, which I like that's like a way that they've decreased his power through this book.
Yeah. Okay. So now at this point, I'm confused. Does he go to another group of aliens that they're on trial for with robots and different?
It's an impartial system for investigating cops. So the cops don't investigate their own in this world. The Owens, while corrupt and dumb, don't investigate their own. They send them to another corrupt kangaroo court to investigate them.
Okay.
Well, they didn't know it was corrupt.
Yeah, it's been taken over by the guy who makes the robots, who has all the robots on his side, and the whole rest of this issue is just them fighting robots and getting rid of this guy.
Well, yeah,
Green Lantern says,
there's some cool stuff.
"Oh, this is the dumbest part. I hate." Okay, go ahead, Vince. Tell me the cool part. I'll tell you what I hate.
There's a guard robot that's like, put your shit in here. You can't carry your weapons in here. And Green Arrow's like, whoa, hold up. And then the guard immediately just punches Green Arrow in the face. It's like, don't fucking question this. And then it's basically like Dr. Octopus arms for a couple panels, which I appreciate in the 70s comic. It just looks like Doc Ock arms. And then they have their trial, and he doesn't even allow them to bring witnesses. I've never ever seen any type of trial or anything where there haven't been witnesses brought. Cough, cough, the impeachment trial. But they basically say, like, the Kangaroo Court's like, yeah, they're guilty because the thing they were reported by the cops. So the cops are obviously right. So we don't need to listen to this. Cool. They're sentenced to death.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all gagged, and then my favorite part was the jury was all these like really shitty robots. So they're all like falling apart and being like guilty, and I was like, I love the designs of every single robot.
Yeah, the art throughout all this has been really, really great, regardless of anything. Yeah, it's really good. The line I'm thinking of that I like, that's the only thing I wrote down for this whole issue, is with Green Lantern running away from this judge guy on his flying chair, and he says, Green Lantern says, though the judge is mad, I'm conditioned to respect the authority of the law. And he's like trying to like just bring it to him, bring himself to beat up this guy, and it was a rough read for me. I couldn't.
Yeah, it is funny. Like like I get that they wanted him to be like the square like cop character, but like how stupid are you?
Yeah, like, what have we been doing the last few issues? I thought you learned in the first issue, and you were like, I guess I agree. Let's go see everything else. And now you're in space wondering if you've done the right thing, or, like, have you been gaslighted?
This is a judge, so obviously they couldn't be wrong.
He knows he's not even a real judge. He's just some guy who took over.
But he represents...
I don't know if he knows that yet.
Arrow definitely knows it. I know that. No, I think he does know it, because Arrow found it out when they went... They found like the real court people, or the real.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so they get sentenced there, and then they see the real people who run the court. They're like, it's actually not us. It's the robot mechanic who's like taking over. So, and then Lantern is still like, but he's wearing the judge's costume. So who am I to say? Meanwhile, Arrow has
he's a real idiot.
Meanwhile, Arrow's brought in some contraband.
I mean, Kia. Yeah, Kia, he is a cop, so keep in mind, he's very, very stupid.
Yeah, that's fair. He's a very dumb cop.
He's getting there, and he's part of the resistance, but he still relapses. It's not a full linear journey. Sometimes he goes back, like, wait a sec. I thought I was supposed to defer to authority. No, wait, do I? I can't remember. So he's on his journey. And also, but you have to reset him every issue just from like a storytelling standpoint, because what you're supposed to have is the square bootlicker who doesn't know, and then Arrow tell him what the deal is. Like, that's what the premise is.
Yeah, and Green Arrow be like, who else followed orders and listened to judges? The Nazis.
Yeah.
That's what we learned. Don't listen to judges, guys. Don't listen.
So in the last issue, they go to some other universe. How did they end up here? And some other planet? I don't know why they're there, but...
The guy gets sent there. Their friend...
Does he have a name? Does he have a name? Because
I don't think he has a name.
Because like, my notes are just like, it's the Owen guy, the old looking dude.
Yeah.
I scrolled back through like the first issue. I'm like, I don't see his name here, and I looked through my notes, and I'm like, I never said his name. I don't know if he has a name.
I don't think he does. I think you're right. So he gets sentenced to like live in this other place, but it's overcrowded, and like there's no women either. And I'm like, what? It's just like all men, and they're like, killed a woman.
This is just a Star Trek episode.
It's like a barstool forum.
Yeah. And we find out that like this planet ran into some troubles where nobody could have kids, and then this lady named Juna, is that her name?
Juna?
Mother Juna like figured out how to take samples of everybody and make clones and teleport them to wherever they needed to be in the world, and they had memories, and it seems very impressive. Seems like the world was saved. But then she didn't stop, and then people also started having kids again. and now the world is overpopulated. I still don't understand why it's only men.
It's a weird way for things to get overpopulated.
It's a very weird way because, and now the big villain in this world is Mother Juno, who, like, they don't even paint her as a villain.
I don't know why we needed, like, I mean, yeah, because then they're like sympathetic with her at the end, but I don't really get why. Like, I got why.
There's a lot.
Because she can't have kids, Vince. Where were you?
I got that. No, I got that, but I didn't really understand like why we had to do that in this story.
Again, this was, Key was saying they never do a women's lib issue, but what are you talking about? This was mad scientists can't have kids.
Yeah, women be crazy if they can't have kids.
Women be crazy, and why? Okay, so A, why are there no other women on this planet? B, there are like little girls.
There are other women. It's just that they're like have to be protected because like natural pregnancy is like it's the opposite of how the clones reproduce. So they don't like those women.
But all the clones are men?
I guess, but we do see a pregnant woman.
Then why are they like kill the woman? That's what I don't like. Is it just like they remind us of Mother?
She's gonna make more people.
Oh.
There's just
that's what women do.
Did they kill all the women?
There is violence towards women in here, and there's violence towards the male procreators. Yes, in this world, it just feels like it's a skosh one thing too much. Like the fact that we started with like an underpopulation and then boom to an overpopulation. Now that I'm saying it aloud, sounds like an interesting story of like something just kind of went out of control. But
like, who is the bad there is no, like, it's just like overpopulation is bad. Okay, thank you, Green Lantern, I get it. But, so? Yes, I know that overpopulation is bad.
And her motivations were good in the beginning, and she may have been mildly corrupted by it, and she does have a sad story, but I'm not really sure, like, how we're supposed to sympathize with this at the end. It's a Star Trek episode. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to go to, like, a world like this and see, like, what an overpopulation goes through, and, like, people... like how they're hoarding resources and how the society condemns those who are then going to steal more resources. I think it's an interesting story, or at least a hint of an interesting story. I don't really understand its resolution, though.
This planet has teleportation technology, like.
But again, like this issue, and I think it was the Owen like trial issue. They talk about how there's like not enough resources for humans. And then this issue is all about overpopulation, and it's just like it is like Denny O'Neil falling into like a liberal trap where it's like actually those are fake problems created by the uneven wealth distribution. Yes. It's not that there isn't enough to feed everyone. It's literally that we just don't want people to we would rather have the ultra rich than have everyone be alive.
Right, and that this is a super lefty episode, so let's just go into it. The idea, like Thanos was right, like there is overpopulation. We need to limit the population. Like no. There's a Twitter account I just started following called "Has Jeff Bezos decided to solve world hunger today?" Because theoretically, you could stop world hunger with $11 billion a year, and he has 171. So the idea of could Jeff Bezos solve world hunger today? Yes, he could. Does he? No. And
and like you literally have resources that if they're not marketable, that are just thrown away. Like you've got right now people are just burying potatoes in the ground because it's like, well, we just don't need all of this many potatoes. It will crash the price of potatoes too much, so we'll just throw them away.
Yeah,
like when world hunger exists, that's very stupid.
And it's more that like resources could be better distributed, more efficiently created. I know that there were stories about like places having to throw out milk that was designed for like restaurants because restaurants don't have the resource for that, and it just can't be bottled in a way that makes sense to distribute to people who are starving. Like in terms of like milk cartons, like they're not set up for that. But that's a solvable problem. That's not a quick solvable problem, but you can solve for like, well, just figure out how to re-engineer your production process, and then it's not a problem. It's not that there's a scarcity of resources. And
the problem is there isn't enough milk. Like that's obviously not the problem. We have way more than we need.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, as you said, this is very leftist, but I do think he's falling into a liberal trap of which Star Trek did too, to be fair, of, just like, oh, this is the one problem on this planet and we can solve it and then we'll work together.
Solve it in 44 minutes and call it a day. This planet has one problem. But yeah, Kia, you're very keen to not like this book.
I had a great time reading about a bunch of the world's problems that we didn't know how to fix. So, good time. Yeah, I couldn't be done with this book fast enough. I just really hated it. They felt like slogs. They just did not deliver on the potential that it had from the start. And just even within that, the structures of the stories were everything was hard to follow and just had too many weird details. Sorry, not into it. Art was beautiful and interesting ideas. Glad they spurred some nice discussion. Honestly, discussions that I'm a little bit tired of right now. So I had a hard time even getting into that. So yeah, that's my review. I hated it.
I liked it. I liked the first 2 issues, and I liked the 5th issue. I liked the Owen Prison Planet one. I liked that one from just like a sci-fi story perspective. I thought that one was fun. I think it did not live up to its promise, especially in the first 2 issues. I was like texting some of my lefty friends. I'm like, this wasn't a comic. Like, this is pretty cool. Like how Green Arrow is having none of this bootlicker shit. I thought it was super interesting. And then it kind of lost the plot for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I'm with Vince. I liked it. The art is great, but it does, it falls into the trap of monthly comics where it's just like, well, we got to have some kind of crazy science villain, robot, creator, or people won't, 8-year-olds won't pick this up at the drugstore when they're with their mom.
Chris, you actually read the rest of this. So what happens in the rest of these books? Because it's a very short run. It's only like 12 or 13 issues. It's not like a super long ongoing run.
I have not read the rest of this, Vince. Let me start right there. Oh. But I do know that the big thing that happens in the second part of this run is that Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy, they have, like I mentioned Harry Osborn doing drugs earlier. Speedy, turns out he is addicted to heroin.
Oh no, not Speedy.
Yep, Teen Titan fan favorite Speedy.
He's always on Teen Titans Go as like Robin's rival. I don't like the idea of bringing those cartoon characters and he did heroin.
It is a very weird choice, because he wasn't a current Teen Titan, but he had been on the Teen Titans at the time, and he is a teenager.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that maybe Neal Adams' goal was, Denny O'Neil's goal was, I'm going to set out to address as many of the real people issues as I possibly can,
right? And
just mention them. And okay, I guess if I'd known that was the plan going into it. I mean, I guess I kind of did. I don't know. I still don't think that would have changed my mind.
I feel my earlier idea of what this book was, that some of it might be a little heavy-handed or not as deftly told as it could have been, I think is still accurate. I think the first 2 issues made me think that this was going to be a little bit more than that, and actually...
I didn't mind the heavy-handedness. I wanted it to be more heavy-handed, if anything,
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'm thinking of just clumsily told, oh no, Speedy's gonna be on heroin. That book can go real wrong real fast. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, these stories went wrong for just reasons that I couldn't have predicted. They're just wrong. I don't know how to. They're just off. There's just something off about these stories. I don't know. I think I'm done talking about.
Yeah, I think I understand. I think it's the problem of. This is a done in 2, done in 1 storytelling style about complex social issues.
Right.
And so as a result, it's very it's very confused. I do think that first issue we read is really good. So much, like I said, I said it half jokingly earlier, but if this came out in, 2005, it would be 6 parts. You would have 1 issue that was entirely from the point of view from an 8-year-old child that lives in this, these houses that are being destroyed. And she would just see the superheroes for 1 page. And it would be Alex Malieve's art. And I'm just making fun of Daredevil.
Well, yeah, this is a Bendis. This feels like when... Yeah, there's a Daredevil Michael Gaydos run where by Bendis that's he goes to a small town that definitely gave me vibes of this.
Right. Yeah, where like I said, part 4 of 5 is literally the plot does not move forward at all. It's all just but what is this guy doing?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I think it might be time to jump to JLA and Avengers. Sound about right?
Right.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So, I forgot to write down who actually wrote these.
So
Who was it?
It's Kurt Busiek, who I thought we haven't done much Kurt Busiek, but of course we just finished Marvel's I Have the Camera, and we're doing another long read with Kurt Busiek. But Kurt Busiek is also one that straddles like the lines of Marvel history, and he wrote a lot for DC. So it makes sense that he's in here, and I like that he's in here, and I think this works much better than I Have the Camera or DC versus Marvel.
And a long time ago, we did the Ultron Avengers storyline, which would have been right before this.
And Avengers Forever, we also did last year. Which is Busiek. This is a very
which one's Avengers Forever?
That was
I don't think we
did
do Avengers.
Kang and the time traveling stuff.
We did a two-part.
We read that?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I don't remember that at all.
There was a time.
Oh wait, I remember now.
Because there was like the dickhead Hank Pym and the nice Hank Pym had to team up. It was good. But this is a very pared down cast, and I guess this is literally like the year before I started reading comics, because I started reading comics with Avengers Disassembled and New Avengers, and this is the Avengers cast right before that. So it's it's still Cap, Iron Man, Vision. Who else? Scarlet Witch, and then Jack of Hearts is there, who I don't know very well, except I think he dies in the first issue of Avengers Disassembled.
Yeah, Disassembled. Yeah, there's also Jeff Johns run in between, but it sucks. Spoiler alert. It's exactly what I was talking about in terms of 6-part storylines. There's one where we find out that She-Hulk's power is through fear instead of anger. That took 6 parts to figure out. It sucked.
But this is...
there's one where Red Skull's he works in the Department of Defense as Del Rusk, which is literally just the same letters rearranged.
That sounds right. But either way, this is like, compared to DC versus Marvel, which we just read, this is a very pared down cast. It's pretty much your core, what you think of as who would be the Avengers, plus like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who are classic Avengers. It doesn't have your Spider-Mans in it, but everybody else that you would expect is there. And then the JLA or Justice League is exactly who you expect to be there. So it's Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Aquaman, Flash, Green Lantern. I think it's Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, but
it is.
But it's still like your expected cast. We're not getting a lot of like Justice or like the people when I go back and read an Avengers book from like '96. I'm like, who the fuck are these last 3 members? Because I don't know who they are. We got none of that going on here. It's aside from the aforementioned Jack of Hearts, but. It's a very like just clean cast, and I like this book in comparison to DC versus Marvel because it's doing more of what I expected to see in it, and that's my preface for what we're going in here. It's a long book too, by the way.
It is a long book. My preface is that I went into this right after Green Lantern, and I was just fed up with superhero shenanigans right now, and so I was just like, God damn it, it's a double issue of all this? Like, shit, all right.
Well, it's basically like, my highlights is like, shit's going on. The big thing that happens is the Justice League ends up in the Marvel universe, like the whole Justice League. And so they, get to see villains. They're not like doing like crossovers where like, well, Batman's actually in this universe and so-and-so's in this universe. Like they all are going over to the other universe.
Yeah.
It's and I think it's a little of both, right? Because at first, the Justice League is in the Marvel universe and the Avengers are in the DC universe, right? Like they all...
the Avengers only go to the DC universe at the end.
Right.
Is that what it is? Okay.
There's a lot going on, but and there's like some preamble and like portally bullshit, and I don't really care about that.
I do like the beginning because the beginning is minor villains that you would only recognize if you're a comics fan. Terminus, I think, is the Marvel Fantastic Four villain that shows up in DC World. And so they have to fight him, and then Starro, who's a little more famous because he's been in cartoons, shows up in the Marvel universe and is dropping a starfish on everybody.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah. I like that they did that, but at the same time, like, despite me hosting a comic book podcast for 5 years, I still don't... I was like, I think this is supposed to be a different universe. I think it's a Marvel person in DC, and then a DC villain in Marvel, which, one, I like that because DC versus Marvel didn't really do that. But I think they should have done somebody a little more famous... Because I don't even know that
It's what you were just saying. Like, we didn't include all the nobody characters that you wouldn't know, except they just started with them. So
as villains though, this is a big threat, but we don't know what this threat is because it's new to us. It would be a little better if it had been something that was a little more recognizable, but
Because
on
then
the other hand,
you know that it's been like a dimension switch. Because I didn't even realize. I thought like just new people were coming out of. I don't know. It's just
like if it had been like an Ultron or somebody else had shown, if Ultron had been in the DC universe, and then like I'm trying to think of like who at that level. Not you don't want to burn like Darkseid. Yeah, Brainiac. That'd be a good one to just show up there.
Brainiac and Ultron, I think, are on about the same level, where it's like they're big threats, but they're not like the main characters of a book like this.
Right, and they're visually distinct, so you would at least be like, this doesn't fit. Something of that level, I think, would have worked a little better. But I really do like, and this is where I started. I like when the whole Justice League ends up in the Marvel universe. I'm like, man, this universe is fucked up. Like Geonosia got destroyed because I guess that probably happened in New X-Men probably around that year.
Yeah, it had just happened. Yeah,
right.
And they're seeing Latvia with Doctor Doom in charge, and they're like, "This is
Latveria."
Oh, sorry,
not a real country.
You're right. Yeah, and they're like, "Why don't the heroes do something about this?" But like before that, I think. Wait, is that before or after where we meet like the Watcher and the Grand Master?
Oh, that's true. Those do show up right before then. Yeah,
that is the beginning.
That's the more visually stuff I wanted to see. Like all the DC heroes being like, "Who the fuck is this Watcher dude?" Like that's
and like I don't know why. Like I know the Grand Master is just a little bit shifty. We read some stuff with them in the Infinity Stones and all that, and he like they put the lasso of truth on him, and he says, "Hey, if you guys want to fix all this weird stuff that's going on, we need 12 relics, 6 from each of the universes, and it's like the 6 Infinity Stones and a bunch of random items.
Like the Wand of Watumi, who I know that's important, but I've already forgotten what it is.
I love that, and I don't know if we mentioned George Perez is the artist who did Crisis on Infinite Earths and Teen Titans and Avengers and lots of things. But I love that conceit of they have the 12 items, and when the Justice League sees it, they're like, "Oh, it's these famous 6 items," because they only know the ones from their world. Mm-hmm. And then in the Marvel universe, they're like, "Oh, it's these 5 items. We all know these." And then when Hawkeye is supposed to name his item, he's like, "Yeah, I know what it is." He doesn't name it, but he's like, "Yeah, I get it."
Yeah.
And I like that though. This is like it's more of the history of the universes. Is like big items from the history of both universes are now going to be like MacGuffins in this story.
Wait a minute, no, I didn't even realize the 6 Soul Gems, the Infinity Stones, count as one item amongst themselves, but they're always spread out. All right, whatever.
Yep. That's one of them.
But they're like basically they're MacGuffins from if you were to do like a Marvel movie and we're like we need. They fucking just did this shit with Endgame. It's like we need these 6 items from the movie's histories to blend them all together. Like I like this. I think it's a good pretext for it. And
I do. I wish I had a little bit more reason for like why do I need this wheel and this bell? What are these things? Okay, whatever.
But I think compared to like DC versus Marvel, like I think that this has a much this cares about each universe's history more.
Yeah.
Than DC versus Marvel. Even though that end moment like you done good really got me on the end of DC versus Marvel.
Yeah. So
it is strange that affected you so much because I was like, it's fine.
Yeah. So the Justice League, they see the Marvel universe, they don't like it, they go back home. Meanwhile, the Avengers,
they also go to Monster Island and pick up the Ultimate Nullifier. So we get Fing Fang Foom and a couple of other Jack Kirby characters, which they do point out that they're like, oh, these are really well designed monsters, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah. We get what else do we get? So the Avengers, they go to the DC universe and they're like,
well, yeah. So the Avengers are like these people just showed up and they stole the Ultimate Nullifier, and then we sent them back. So we don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something bad. And in the meantime, so the Grand Master, who we knew was shifty from I think Infinity Gauntlet, tells Justice League what to do, and they're very like, I don't know about this. Like Wonder Woman puts him in the lasso, and it's like he was telling the truth, but I got the sense that he wasn't telling the whole truth. And then Metron from the New Gods shows up to the Avengers and is like, I don't work with those guys, but let me help you out. Here's a mother box. And they're like, what? And so they give him a mother box, and Iron Man's like, oh, it wants to be referred to by female pronouns, which he respects. The mother box's wishes.
Good job, Iron
Man. So yeah, they go to the DC universe, and they notice that superheroes are a little bit more celebrated, a little bit more liked. And Captain America instantly just jumps to this leap of like they've clearly made this own world like to cater to their own whims, and they've got these people brainwashed. This is not okay. And then the Justice League shows up, and Superman is like, "Hey, stand down! You're all going to be taken into custody instantly. You're in our world, and this is not okay." But both of the other members of the teams are like, "Hey, should we calm down a little? Like, what? Why are you being so
Cap is very abrasive in this book.
Well, I get the impression
Superman.
I get the impression that there's some sort of like mind control business going on, because it's almost making fun of the like, oh, every time these heroes meet, they have to fight. Well, the true leaders are going to make them all fight, and I am not into that. Like, I'm just, again, like, that's one of those things that's like, oh, every time we got to team up, they got to fight, then they got to team up. Okay. Like, I don't know. I'm interested. I would be more
like, I want to see who's better.
Sure, whatever.
I want them to all be friends. I want them to all be friends and then go face something together. That's what I want.
So I would be I would be more interested.
See Thor can beat Superman.
I would be more interested in seeing them talk about these differences of like public perception and that kind of stuff, and like this idea that Cap does have about like, is that okay for them to be like celebrities versus like I don't know. That was interesting, and then all of a sudden it just felt like we're gonna fight, and I was like, oh, all right, well, never mind.
Or like Flash goes to the Marvel universe the first time by himself, and he like helps a mutant, and he's like, all right, everybody, calm down. Like, he's just a kid, and they're like, he's a mutant too, get him, and he's like, what is going on?
Yeah,
I do like how Flash, when he shows up, there's like, there's no Speed Force here, I'm fucked.
Yeah, that was funny. That their rules are different so that his powers don't work.
And Quicksilver's like, their speedster has a museum. What the fuck? Like, this is awesome. I'm kind of jealous. I loved it.
Yeah.
I did enjoy
it. Great.
And why don't Captain America and Batman remember that because they remember at the end of DC versus Marvel, they're like, but a few characters have some memory.
There's some stuff in this book where they're like, this is familiar. But I don't think they're really ever going to go into it. But that's at least a bone to be like continuity hounds. Like, we do acknowledge that DC versus Marvel happened. Just deal with it.
Right. And Hawkeye does make the joke that he's just like, oh, these guys are like the Squadron Supreme, the Hyperion and the rest of the like fake Justice League that we fought before. Which was pretty funny. That it's just like, yes, you have fought parody versions of these guys before. And then he even says, like, they're probably mind controlled.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so we'll see where this goes. I have a feeling that we will find these 12 items, and we'll beat some bad guy. And then we'll split back up.
Yeah, we also, there's like a guy who destroys Archon's world. I don't know if we've explained who Archon is, but it doesn't matter. He's a Conan ripoff. There's a guy, his world gets destroyed, and then like the Injustice Society's world gets destroyed, and then Grandmaster is like talking to this like scientist who's destroying all these worlds, and he's like, it's a good little epilogue to the story for like nerds like me, because he's like, I want to know what came before, like what formed the universe that came before this universe. And Grandmaster's like, well, I know a guy who is actually from the previous universe that I think you might want to meet. And he's like, what? You must introduce us. And like, being a nerd, you're like, oh, he's talking about Galactus.
I love it. I actually like this book a lot more than DC versus Marvel. I think it's setting up in a better place for where I want to end up, and just see.
I probably would have liked it if I hadn't read it right after Green Lantern, and if it wasn't as long. And different state of mind might have helped. I'm not going to go back and read it though. We'll see what happens next time.
Well, guess what, Kia? We're not going to have any superheroes next issue. Well, we're going to have the JLA.
We're going to have this. Does it get shorter? Does number 2 get shorter?
I think it's not the same length. This was like 60 pages. I feel
it's like 48 pages or something.
Okay, but the other book we're doing is not superheroes, so you don't have to deal with that. There's some more verses.
What are we doing next? This was your choice. You want to talk about it? Go ahead.
Alien versus Predator. Or Aliens versus Predator?
Aliens versus
It's with an
Predator,
S? Okay.
Plural, yes.
So, fun fact, Disney terminated their licensing, recently acquired Fox, who owns the rights to Alien and Predator. And then Disney recently terminated its comics publishing rights with Dark Horse Comics. Now, Dark Horse Comics has been publishing Alien and Predator comics since the 80s. And Dark Horse actually created the concept of Aliens versus Predator before the video games, before the movies. You've probably heard of that concept of Aliens versus Predator. And there was some comics in there, like in the early 90s, I want to say, maybe even 1990, Kia? Is that right on the dates?
I don't remember the years, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think it's like 89, 90. I think as Kia did some research, it started out in Dark Horse Presents, which was kind of like an anthology book, and then spun out into its own book and had been going for a long time. I've never read this, but I think the fact that like Dark Horse Comics created the AVP concept that then spiraled out into video games and movies is noteworthy for comics. We don't cover enough Dark Horse as it is. And it's kind of an end of an era that Dark Horse will no longer be doing Alien or Predator comics. So I wanted to check out where it started at the beginning. So we're going to be looking at Alien versus Predator. It's in a bunch of collections, and they're actually selling out right now because they're no longer allowed to print them starting, I think, in February.
So it's also there's a bunch of just Aliens versus Predator series and miniseries and that kind of like spin-off stuff. The one that we're reading is just called Aliens versus Predator. It's a 5-issue miniseries that's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that 0 issue does include the original 3 short stories. So if you just read that 0 through 4, Aliens versus Predator, you're going to get the whole beginning story. Yes. I think. I can't, I haven't read it. I can't promise
It's by Ryan Stradley.
Who?
I have no idea. It's probably going to be like, I honestly don't know what this is going to be like. I think it'll be 90s comics. It'll be 90s military comics is probably what it'll end up being like. But I think it's interesting for like the industry that they basically created this whole concept in comics, and then it bled itself into the real movies and stuff. Because I think it even predates Predator 2, which then had the alien xenomorph like in the background at the end of Predator 2. I think this predates that movie. So I think it'll be cool. Okay. If it's not cool, well, at least it's not superheroes, Kia.
I mean, we've still got superheroes to deal with, but again, 5 issues. Hopefully these read a little quicker. But yeah, I think we'll get to it and we'll see what happens here. If I don't like it, I just won't read it. That'll happen.
Keel, well, just at the 32-minute mark, he'll be like, and this is where I stopped reading.
I think it's a real thing where I'm stuck at the computer all day here, and if I'm reading comics, I'm like, I'm not gonna waste my time on this stuff if I'm not enjoying it anymore. It's it's the reality of it.
I read an article about this guy who watches a ton of movies, and he basically has a stopwatch, and if 10 minutes it hasn't grabbed him, he just stops it. And then he gives every movie like a 5-minute extension, and if it makes it to 30 minutes, then he'll watch the rest of it. But
that's fair. I tried watching Lego Batman, and I was just like, what? I couldn't get 5 minutes into it, and I said, nope.
If you're not liking it after 10 minutes or 5-10 minutes, you're probably not going to like the rest of it. I think it's fair. I liked it a lot, but I get it. If you're not on board, you're not going to be on board.
Yeah.
Read comics. Don't read comics. Kia doesn't give a fuck.
I don't give a fuck. Some of my friends sometimes won't read comics.
Kia's like, this is no Ninjago movie.
I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about Ninjago. It confuses me. Did Nintendo just put out a Ninjala game?
Yes, it's a free to play, I think, or free to start as they brand it. But
yeah. Well, there we go. Okay. Well, that's what we've got today. Anything else we want to talk about? What else is going on?
My show with Santikos Entertainment on Facebook is still going strong. We recently covered Into the Spider-Verse on Facebook, and we're going to be covering ideally Black Panther this coming week on Friday at noon. But if the guest we want to be there isn't available, then I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do. So check us out noon Central Time on Santikos Entertainment Facebook.
Cool.
Great. Chris, what about you? What's going on?
Your Stupid Minds. It's on Twitter. It's on Facebook. We have a movie coming out. It's available on Netflix to watch, and I recommend you watch it. Spoiler alert. It's called Between Two Worlds, I believe is the name of it. Nicolas Cage. I can't really do it justice, but let's just say that there's a sex scene where his character, who's a truck driver with a bunch of rings, reads the poetry of Nicolas Cage.
Oh, jeez. And this is a current-ish movie?
Yes, it came out, I believe, 2018, maybe 2019.
Okay.
Wow.
And it also features, I can't remember her name, the German actress from Run, Lola, Run, who is closer to being the same age as Nicolas Cage, only a few years younger than him. And, of course, her daughter is also a character that he has sex scenes with. Not her actual daughter, but her character's daughter.
Oh. Ugh. Yikes.
So, Run Lola Run, great movie to check out. Between Two Worlds, a great movie to check out if you want Nicolas Cage sex scenes with people about his own age and people, the children of people his own age.
Oof.
Okay, very good. Do we want to do an over under next time? I know we were talking about that before the show. We haven't done that in a while. Do we want to do an over under for Aliens versus Predator? What would it be?
I feel like the aliens, there's also Marines involved, but I was gonna say how many aliens die versus how many predators die, but that might be too much to track. Like number of battles, like who wins each battle.
I don't know if that's even how it works. Are there battles? I mean, here's what. How about if a number of times anyone says whoever wins, we lose? How about that?
That's not gonna. I mean, just at the end. So going by the end of this arc, do we think there will be a definitive winner? One, and two, who do you think the winner will be?
I think it should be one-liner counter. Every time a Marine makes a one-liner,
game over, man. Game over.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Dark Horse Comics to say if they're going to be much one-liner heavy.
I also don't know what counts as a one-liner anymore. You know, like maybe.
I'm going to say at the end of it, the Predators will be the definitive winner.
Okay, are we all just predicting different things about it?
Yeah.
So Vince predicts that who's going to be the winner?
Predators. Chris
predicts there's going to be a lot of one-liners from Marines, and I guess I'll do something about the aliens. I've never seen. I tried to watch Alien and I got bored, and I have seen clips of Predator and I don't really care to watch it.
Yeah, you have to watch at least Alien 1. That one's really good.
I think I did watch the whole thing and I just didn't care. So
I like it a lot.
Very good.
So that's happening, and very excited about Aliens versus Predator next time. I think that's it for the show. Thanks, everybody.
Aliens, I guess we'll talk about it when we talk about it. But I feel like it's held up a little bit worse because it's been ripped off a million times.
I don't know. I don't know. There's more aliens in the second one because it's plural. That's all I really do know. I tried playing Alien Isolation. That was a pretty cool game.
Yes. I've heard good things about that one.
We'll talk about that and more next episode.
We'll definitely talk about all that. But thank you so much for listening. Vince, I love you.
I love you too.
Chris, I love you.
I have to go back to my home planet.
I don't even care today. That's fine. All right, bye everybody. Have a good night.